Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone. I just got off this conversation with my dear friend and one of my teachers, Madison Nees. And Madison has been on the podcast before, and it was such an incredible conversation, and I really can't wait for you to listen to it. But Madison and I talked a little bit about Radical Aliveness, which is a lineage that Madison has been a part of for some time. We spoke about the principles of radical aliveness, how it's informed our lives and our work together. I've worked with Madison in a few different capacities, but probably the most significant one was as a participant in her course Katabasis last year, fall 2022 to spring 2023. And it was, I think the word I'm looking for is tectonic. It was a really shifting experience for me. And I think Madison taught in such an unusual way. Like, I don't feel like I was being taught anything really in that course, but I look back at that experience and I marvel at all the things that I've learned. And so I wanted to have Madison over as she's preparing for the second run of this course. And so Katabasis is not purely a radical aliveness space. Katabasis to me feels like a Madison space. There's a lot of different it's a space, it's a course where there's a lot of different confluence of interest and modality, and it's definitely a space that's alive. It's a community that's alive, and I feel so honored, to have been part of that community, and it's played a really important part in my life. And shortly after finishing that container, I kind of put a pause on a lot of conversations that I was having in this podcast. If you have been with me for a while, you know that Healing the Spirit started off as mostly conversations and interviews with people. And I decided to put a pause on that, and I wasn't exactly sure why. It just felt right. But in this conversation with Madison, I kind of discovered why. I decided that what I really wanted was to have a space where I can have really alive conversations with people. And I'm not saying that conversations that I've been having on this podcast haven't been alive, but I want to really allow my conversation space to be a space where we connect as humans, rather than feeling like, rather than having to hold some level of authority as a practitioner, that certainly has its benefits and it has its time and place. And I hop off this conversation with Madison knowing that I want to have more aliveness in my conversations and be a human having conversations with other humans. So thank you, Madison, for facilitating that knowing for me and with me. And so I before I let you go and I let you enjoy this incredible conversation with Madison, where of course we just jumped in right away. I'm going to read you Madison's bio in case you haven't heard of Madison or you have never heard of my first conversation with Madison on this podcast. Just a little introduction. Madison Nees is a human, counselor, artist, and guide. And this is written in first person, by the way. My practice focuses on the intersection of ecology, ritual, and somatics. I have worked in the addiction and trauma treatment industry since 2015. My own journey includes healing from substance use, anorexia nervosa, loss of culture, and self. When I began my journey, I didn't understand that the pull to somatics was a call of my ancestors. I was being pulled to heal all the things my mother could not and ultimately lost her life avoiding. I was being pulled to feel the things my grandmother had no language for. My body knew the language, however, and it spoke in illness, pains, aches, and rage. It also spoke the language of held grief and aloneness. During this process, I discovered gifts hidden beneath these repressed emotions. These gifts were the sensations. The gifts were the rivers of grief, leading me home to myself. They were also the intuition and creativity of my lineage. I always tried to do something with the emotions, but my healing progressed the more I simply sat with them. Instead of trying to push them away, I wondered what would happen if I let them grow. They grew into my practice today. Something I want to share also before we get to the conversation is that Madison is going to be doing an introduction to Radical Aliveness on Sunday, August 27th. So if this conversation resonates with you, or maybe you're interested in checking out Katabasis, I would highly recommend that you check out this event that Madison is doing. And as always, I will make sure that all of the links are in the show notes below. All right, friends, this is my conversation with Madison Nees. Enjoy. Hello, Madison. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. This is what, my second time here?
This is your second time. This is our third conversation on podcasts together. Yeah.
Oh, always a pleasure.
I'm so excited. Yeah. I don't know. Where do you want to start? Do you have an impulse? Is there a place that feels you're the Aries here, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually do. So, I know that we had kind of talking about radical aliveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to start by just kind of naming the principles of that work, because although RA is a certain frame, there is a lot of room for individual frames to come in. So here's what I mean by that. So radical aliveness is a non-expert model, right? Which means I have a perspective as a practitioner. Here's where it comes from. I'm going to name this with you. Here's what something means to me, right? Because I could see your behavior in a certain way. And it may not be true for you. So I want to just name my frame before we move forward. So the first principle is cultivating a non-shaming attitude. So that it essentially means like this is a place where we know we can see and experience other people's deep goodness and essence.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, because I know we've worked together with RA, like, how has that journey been for you? I feel like...
Yeah. It's interesting because I think this particular principle continues to reveal itself. And for me, it's been a lot easier cultivating a non-shaming attitude, a non-shaming heart towards others than towards myself. And what I've discovered through our work together, which also happened in Katabasis, which, we were in Katabasis last year, I guess last fall, was that it was really when I was in community, when I was surrounded by these kindred spirits, right, it was really easy for me to access that when I'm
Mm,
observing other people.
mm,
And so a lot of the work for me after Katabasis has been around sitting with myself and learning how to become my own best friend, essentially.
mm, mhm,
And what does it
mhm,
mean to cultivate a non-shaming attitude towards myself, and especially the parts of me? Like last night, for example, I was just lying in bed, and getting frustrated by yet again another bout of insomnia, and
yeah.
I noticed the voice that was in my head was just not very kind. And so I
Mm,
was like, oh, what
mhm,
happens if I
mhm,
move away from considering fixing myself or fixing my
mhm,
problem and just being with that part of me?
mhm,
Like we're lying in bed, there's nothing else to do. We're not going to look at
mhm,
our phones.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
what would happen if we just sit there
mm,
and be with that part, And even I've kind of taken it a step further and allowed myself to even talk to that part and say that
mm,
you're a part of me, you
yeah.
belong with me, you belong to me,
Mm,
and just seeing what happens.
mm, mhm, mhm,
Yeah. What comes up for
yeah.
you at this moment?
Yeah. Actually really similar. I kind of part of the ways in radical aliveness, right? There's the personal healing, there's the interpersonal, and then there's also the systemic component of the process, which is essentially talking about like we all have been socialized in a certain way, right? I got messages around what was the right way to interact with myself, with other people, how I was socialized to even look. And I got some pretty strong messages, they
Mm,
were pretty strict. And so I very similarly can kind of have, how do you say, like a, a very strong hand with myself. But then that
mm-hmm,
leads me into the next principle, which is like knowing that I don't know,
mm,
right? We all have this, what we call a perceptual filter, and
mm-hmm,
that's connected to how we were socialized. And all of those messages that we got, it shapes the way that I see things, the assumption I make, the things I value. And if I'm not aware as a human of my perceptual filter, I'm definitely going to misinterpret the world around me.
mm,
And so to me, knowing I don't know, and a lot of these principles overlap, is about maintaining an attitude of curiosity.
mm-hmm,
I know these things about myself. Like, for instance, something I was thinking about before we hopped on the call, Jonathan, is like how words mean different things to different people. Like, for instance, erotic, right?
yeah.
Of course, there's a definition, but you might have a different perception of that than me, or
Mm-hmm,
intimacy,
mm-hmm.
or even anger. Like, we all have different images that arise with certain words.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's okay. This one's a rich place, I think. Um yeah, and in my life specifically, I've noticed myself um sometimes so let me see if I can organize my thoughts here.
mhm,
What I've noticed is sometimes my judgment towards
mhm,
others come up when I
mhm,
perceive that others are doing something
mhm,
that may totally be natural for them, right? But
mhm,
what I've grown to realize through being in your container and just kind of living as a human being is that
mhm.
the disconnect there happens because those ways of being are not necessarily what would feel good for me,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But it comes up as judgment towards others at first, when
Mhm.
actually it's a teacher for me. It's me recognizing, oh, we don't do that. We
Yeah.
don't do that
Yeah.
here because XYZ, right? But it doesn't
Yes.
mean
Yes.
that that person is not moving from a space of, being authentic and true to themselves. So
Yeah.
here's what I've been wondering about, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts or if anything's coming up for you around this. To me, this particular principle is a little bit, there's a part of me, at least conceptually, that feels like it's in contrast to what I learned when I was cultivating psychic skills and when I was cultivating intuitive skills. There's a part of me that's like, oh no, I need to trust what I'm seeing. So how do we trust what we're seeing, right? Intuitively,
Oh,
our
this is
intuitive
juicy.
hits.
It's really juicy. Really, really juicy.
Yeah, while also recognizing that, like, we are not the same, right? And we don't come from the same places.
Right. So first of all, I want to say I loved what you were saying, because in the radical aliveness frame, like, we're not working, like, I also work in modern Western psychology, which is really, you get the stamp of health the more you can adhere to certain norms, and in RA, like, we work with conflict, we invite conflict, difference, we invite judgment into the space, just because of what you were just saying. Judgment is fertile soil, right? Like, it's happening. The brain is a meaning making machine. It makes judgments that are like, it just does it. And it does it as an ancient survival response. How can I negate that? But I live in a world where, judgment is kind of like a dirty word. But what I heard you say is, like, if you can sit with the judgment, you can own the assumptions that you're making. And then when you own the assumptions that you're making, it will lead you deeper into your own value system, which is part of where I think knowing that you don't know really comes in. Because when I know what's true for me so deeply, right? I'm in it. I'm grounded. I know where my triggers are. I know my history. I know the assumptions that I tend to make based off of X, Y, and Z. I am so much more open. I can become more open to the mystery that is in front of me. And like, allowing life and allowing people and allowing things to be as big as they really are. And so when it comes to the psychic conversation, because, some of my friends are like, you're psychic, like, this thing. And I've always rebelled a little bit against that, although there are certain things that I've known in my life. So I think it's not linear. Like, we have to go into the world knowing that we don't know things and have a total open, curious, like, field. Like, maybe part of what is true for you and true for me is that we do have certain way of knowing that are non-normative. Right? Like, non-normative, maybe not logical, maybe not written down on paper. And can we validate that as true for us while still being open to, say I'm working with a client, like, naming, this is what I'm experiencing in my own system. I want to check it out. Is that something that's also coming up for you? Does that feel accurate for you? And I think for me, it's about the finesse, because there are things that I'd be knowing,
Yeah, and sometimes in my own experience, that knowing is more a portal than a destination. It leads you somewhere, right? And so when we let it be a portal, I think it becomes an invitation for curiosity. Following that breadcrumb. There's something about getting that intuitive knowing that I think gives you the courage to follow the breadcrumb, right? But then not presuming that you're going to know where that's going to lead you is, I think, where the magic is and where the mystery is, as you mentioned.
Right. Yeah. And, I noticed that the things that come through for me feel more accurate the more that I know what's true for me. The more that I validate my own kind of perspective, the more I'm not filtering information through my wound, basically, and making a ton of, like, ratchet assumptions about people. So would you kind of brings me to the next principle, which is welcoming multiple perspectives. I was really like, the last iteration of Katabasis was really exciting for me because we had vastly different perspectives in the space, and I felt and I saw how like shaky that can make the ground, you know, because it's like, okay, I want to have a women's space, so we all have something in common. I want to have this type of space, so we all have this commonality. And what if you don't do that? You know, then what? Then what? Then what? What do we have to feel? What do we? How do we have? How are we together? And really, so much of my work, it's why I tell people, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you the answers, man. You know, one of my teachers, Anne Bradney, she's like, I don't want you to come to my house. I want you to have your own, you know? So welcoming multiple perspectives is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I need to validate my own perspective.
Yeah. Do you find that when people welcome multiple perspectives in group work, it also helps them welcome multiple perspectives within themselves?
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, so much, you know, I work in these groups and treatment centers, and it's like, pick a feeling. How are you feeling today? Okay, I'm feeling calm. But a lot of times we're feeling a multitude of feelings at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm feeling angry and I'm feeling deeply happy about this. And so really validating my own perspective is about opening to my own humanness, my own complexity, my own vast array of experience and emotional landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I have been thinking about is how much I've changed in the last year. And it feels holy, you know, and uncomfortable. And I felt curious, Jonathan, like, does that resonate with you? Like, this year feels particularly big for me.
Yeah. It's felt like that for me too. And I'm sure there are differences in our lived experiences. But how it's tracking for me is a lot of the patterns I've relied upon in order to, in some ways, not look at myself and not look at some of the deeper stuff have just been falling away. Like, I realized for me personally, there were a lot of ways in which I was hiding behind relationships, behind collaborations, and behind communities, as a way to not fully claim what I desire and what makes me feel truly alive. Because there's a story, there's a narrative on a mental conceptual level that going for what I want is not going to end well. And it's not the thing that people want from me, which is probably true. There's something about how working against that projection, right, that other people perceive from you, I think has a cost. Like, we have to pay the price when we work against the projection, because the projection is what makes it easier for us to be in the world, right? Like, if you look at me and you saw, you know, this Asian, you assume that I'm a guy, it would be easier for you to just say, oh yeah, maybe he's a classical pianist, because you've seen a ton of Asian classical pianists. Or you see this person as an accountant because you see a lot of Asian accountants, you know. But where is that really coming from? You know, where are all these projections coming from? And I think part of living a life as a human that is following my authentic inclination means that A, I will shapeshift a lot, you know, and sometimes I surprise myself, right? And B, that I'm guided, right? And I think this guided piece is a big one towards the end of Katabasis for all of us, where we are noticing that, you know, between what I'm conceptualizing as the source of our consciousness and our body,
Mm-hmm.
there's an intermediary, and I think the intermediary is our intelligence, right? There's an innate intelligence, and that innate intelligence is not exactly like, it's not fully the body and it's not fully the source consciousness, right? It's something else in between that's kind of driving us, like becomes this propelling force. So I don't know where I'm really going with this, but I think I will close by saying that following and appreciating my internal intelligence and trusting that there's even intelligence to begin with, even in the most erratic
Yes.
seeming action that I did, right? It's part of the whole thing, you know?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I was coming home from a women's gathering in the forest, and I got in an altercation with one of my friend's friends. And I just said the thing, and I felt so much shame afterwards. And this is the value of doing work in community. Like, I used to work in didactic relationships, and doing this in a group instead is, my friend held me and she said, no, you were a part of the group field and you said what I could not say. You were feeling the anger that I could not feel. Thank you. It was my birthday. I needed that, and I was like, oh, and so I just speaking to that intelligence, right? That comes through even when it's extremely uncomfortable. Like, that changed me. That changed me that day, because I was like, whoa, in my family of origin, I was socialized. The anger was to only be expressed behind closed doors. And any other time it needed to be suppressed, and perfection was the only acceptable option. And you know what? I threw caution to the wind. Perfection was out the door, and I popped off and I spoke some truth.
Yeah.
Okay. And it felt good.
Yeah.
And while I'm right here, I would just like to mirror to you, Jonathan. I see you as an artist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. You say that.
Is it?
I receive that, and I feel a lot of feelings actually hearing you say that, because it feels, to me, that's what I'm always striving for. But what I'm realizing, Madison, after Katabasis, is that it's not enough for me to just appear like an artist on the outside. I want it on the inside too. Like, I want the experience of feeling my art move through me. And it's like, it's moving through me in multiple ways, but I think the process of more deeply honoring how it's wanting to move through me at this moment, in this period of my life, that's the biggest challenge for me right now. It's really hard to just be like, you know what? That's what makes me feel alive. So I'm going to do that, even though maybe it doesn't make me as much money, or people don't like it, or I don't get validation from it.
Right.
How can I let myself live there for a little bit without hardening into it? Because that's the other thing too. It's easy to then kind of go the other direction, right? If you've been someone, or I'm not even going to speak for other people. When I look at myself, I've often oscillated between living according to the projections, like satisfying, recognizing, identifying, recognizing, and then honoring the projection and working with it and letting myself have whatever I'm getting out of that projection. And then swinging onto the other end of the pendulum, where I'm consistently like holding on to like being someone who doesn't live according to that projection, But what does it look like if I play right in this middle ground? Like, what if I let myself go back and forth a little bit here,
So I'm hearing you talking about the principle of say yes to everything, which when we emailed, you were like really drawn to that one. So maybe we can spend a little time here, because I love hearing this, like, not having a binary perception of it needs to be like this and projections are inherently bad.
Yeah.
And instead using the laboratory space of your life to find what is true for you, which is ultimately what we do in a lot of my spaces. Can we try on different energies?
Yeah.
Can we take some risks, follow some impulses, notice some sensations that we normally may suppress, and let it move us?
Yes. Yes, I love that. This is bringing me to one of the patron saints of Katabasis. I don't know if you're still working with her. I assume you are, but
of course. I'm in a chokehold. I can't move.
But you mentioned that one of the beings that you are calling into this container is Hecate, and I've been working with her too. And
oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know if you can see, but there's my little Hecate altar right there. The key that you gifted me was somewhere in there. I have to take a picture for you.
Beautiful.
But what you were just saying, Madison, reminds me of Hecate, because that to me feels like the crossroads. Right? Hecate is often associated with crossroads in a lot of the places where things are written about her. And to me, this question of what does it look like to live on the crossroads have kind of been a guiding principle too. And I think I've also been seeing the crossroads as the nexus, right? The crossroads is like where all the things meet, you know? And there's risk there, there's uncertainty there, because you don't really know what's going to happen when these disparate parts or these seemingly foreign objects are kind of colliding into one another. I'm curious to hear what this principle, say yes to everything, how has it lived through you? What's alive for you around that principle?
To me, saying yes to everything is about trying to cultivate an attitude of curiosity. Like I've always been a pretty impulsive person, like as a fire sign, as an Aries, like that's part of my aliveness and my energy. And I want that to flow. And I want it to flow not towards destruction, right? I feel like there is a little nuance here. I want it to flow towards consciousness, bringing things out of hiding into the light, which is a lot of what I do. And it doesn't have to be light, maybe into open air. And for me, saying yes to everything is kind of easy with other people, especially when I hold space. But saying yes, and it comes back to something that you were saying yes to my own creative energy. Like, this is my life force. This is how I show up in my feelings. It's my unique way of processing. It's, it's my energy. And here's my edge around my own personal creative practice, because I was socialized that if you're not doing it for money, for esteem, it is not worth doing. And I doodle and I do it, and I process, and I think things, and I come up with new solutions and things I'd never thought of before, and I'm just letting it be a practice, like a home centering ground, because like you're saying, I live in liminal realms. I don't particularly feel attached to a certain gender. I'm mixed. I don't live on the lands I grew up on. Like, in a lot of ways, I feel unrooted. So can I be rooted and devoted? Devotion is a big word for me right now, to my own practice. And in that, let all of these different expressions come through me. And so, like, creative practice in and of itself is about saying yes to everything. Like, could I make something ugly? Could I record a song where it's just totally me being sad instead of being happy, which I was socialized to show, So to me, saying yes to everything is about allowing myself to be in the full expression of my energy and right? Because that's really glamorous. I see it a lot on the internet. Be all of you. That's great. Okay. But you're going to impact your environment and your people. So then what?
Yeah.
Stay. can you stay to the best of your ability? Because ultimately, I grew up in individualist culture, the United States, but I understand we impact everything we touch when we move. So staying for impact would also be a part of saying yes to everything.
You know, I was seeing this this account posted something on Threads, and I was reading it last night, and it said something that I think is a really beautiful sentiment, which probably folks listening have heard of this, similar sentiment, right? Something around, sometimes we don't need to make it a story. Sometimes friendships just end, or relationships just end. Two people just move into two different directions. And what you were saying makes me reflect on the ways in which in my life I have had a long history of letting friendships and relationships and opportunities kind of fizzle out as I'm moving into a different direction. But something that's been coming up a lot for me is that when I really let myself dial into what the energy is behind that, oftentimes there's also, there are other parts, but I'm noticing a thread where often I leave or I let relationships fizzle out. I don't stay because I don't inherently believe that people will be able to hold my transformation. That I don't believe that these attachments or these friendships can hold that mutation. And maybe there's intelligence in that, but I'm curious to hear you say more about this piece around staying, because I think that's very hard for a lot of us. And I think that for many people, it's like you do one or the other, right? You either stay too long and you try to preserve it at all costs, often to the detriment of your own desires and your own well-being. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you can never stay put long enough to see, what the impact of you following your desires and your intelligence looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think staying for impact is different to me than taking on the impact. It just means like I'm aware that I've impacted you and you're having your own ecosystem response with your own history that's arriving. And there's a way where, because I know where I'm coming from and I feel solid in my decision, I can stand with you here. And I might be changed by the interaction, or I might still agree with myself and be like, yeah, this relationship is not moving with me forward. But I think what's coming up for me, and I have a lot of thoughts about it as someone who works in Western psychology, and I'm pretty controversial in the places that I work in. I rock the boat and I like it. And what I mean by that is like there's so much focus on individualized healing and getting what the individual wants and individual desires. I don't think it's binary. I don't think we should only be looking to the collective. What is the collective, but at the same time, I am a human. I am a Homo sapien. There's a few things I know from my perception about that experience, which is that I cannot survive without other humans. A baby who is fed and given water, but not touched, but not loved, but not cared for, and not attuned to, it will still die. And that tells me something about who I am and what I need as a human. And in so many ways, modernity is, in at least my experience of modernity in Southern California, in my little home, is oppositional to that, And so I just think when it comes to like healing, or I've been using the word returning. I don't like healing. It denotes that something's broken. And I believe we all have an intact essence, and it's about returning to those qualities. That's not a linear, easy process. But yeah, I see it a lot, like cut people off, like do this, do that. And maybe there's middle ground. Maybe there's some liminal crossroads option here that we're
Yeah.
exploring.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the fertile soil is, right? Because in order for us to really be in that middle ground, it often necessitates us to not stay attached to the options that have been presented to us, right? And I think in order to access that, we need to look deeper into ourselves and into often the other person and the relationship itself, you know?
Yeah.
And that is, I think, so this is bringing me to my next question for you, Madison, which is something I've been thinking about a lot after Katabasis, is the ways in which we create a culture within that space, right? And I think because we have that culture, we have the ability to go deeper together. And then the container is dissolved. And then you find that people in your life or outside of the container didn't have that culture.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to hear about your experience with being a radical aliveness practitioner, being someone who's really immersed in that world, which I imagine, you know, in the however many years you've been practicing this modality, have given you community or exposure to containers and communities that have this culture, right? I'm not presuming that the culture is a monoculture, but it has some principles holding it, right? What do you do then when you go out into the real world and it's like literally the jungle?
Right. There is a movie called Unschooling the World, and I love this movie. And in it, it talks about how culture, and essentially, you know, when people go to other countries, they're like, we're going to teach you English and we're going to fix you. We're actually doing something, right? That's very problematic because culture is kind of the padding that keeps the individual in a way safe, or gives them certain rules or guidelines. Like it's the comfy, cozy, how do you say, lining that helps the individual navigate this life. And not always cozy, but for some reason I like the image of a blanket there. But in RA, they absolutely say, they're like, if you come out into the world and you're just like, this is my intention and I'm just going to name this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to take this risk, like the world is not like that. You know, and they say that all the time. And I'm going to tell you right now, it has had me shook because I grew up in RA. I started this when I was 25. I'm 33 now. Like this is very much like in my bone. It's become a part of my socialization now. And I struggle to find places. And I also struggle to bring the fullness of my energy because I don't want to rock the boat. I was socialized not to rock the boat. And at the same time, what are the small ways I can be radically alive in my immediate relationships and start to, like, you know, ease people into it and see if they're even open to that frame. But it definitely is a jolt.
Yeah.
It's a jolt.
Yeah. This is actually making me think of something that you reflected to me a few moments ago about being an artist, because in this way, I also see that you are inviting people into a kind of artist mentality, a kind of artistic practice in their own lives, where, you know, you are creating something, right? Like to rock the boat is to create something else. Basically, what you're saying is, I see you, materials. I'm going to change, reorganize, transmute you into something else, right? And it's scary. Or it can be. It's also exciting.
Oh, fear and excitement have like a similar frequency, at least in my own system sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you scared of?
I think abandonment is a big one.
Mm.
You know, because who knows, right? Maybe you rocked a boat and the web that has been holding you for this whole time can't take this new frequency, can't take this new way of being, you know, and then we have to rearrange and then everybody falls, right? Like there's that fear. There's also the fear, I think, that's maybe more profound and lurks a little deeper of being actually seen. Like, what if I get what I want? What if I get the relationship that I want? What if I get the job that I want? What if I get the business that I want, right? Who would I be without the identity of lacking? Scary.
I kind of want to take just a moment to like feel that. Because I resonate. I suspect people listening resonate, and just noticing like, how does that impact my body? Maybe it doesn't. What goes offline? What comes online? Yeah. To me, practice is everything right now. Like practice. This is a year of practice. It doesn't mean that it's gonna go anywhere or make any money. Okay, I'm pretty clear right now. Like I'm just in devotion to whatever this is, and that's okay. But I'm still gonna show up and practice anyway. And I would say, for me, the more that I see myself, the more that I stand with and for myself, the less I'm fearful that that web will break. The less I'm fearful that somebody is going to see something that I don't want them to see, because I've seen it. I know it.
Yeah. You know, for some reason, what I'm hearing in my head is this voice that I think I learn from the collective around what it means to be working with yourself as an individual. I think this is also a thread that I'm seeing in our conversation of this kind of tension, you know, this ontological tension between the individual as a concept and the collective as a concept. And what I'm wondering about is, you know, doing this kind of work, is it selfish? Is it, you know, when we allow ourselves to own our perspective, are we simply amplifying and perpetuating individualism?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think about that too?
Well, I want to really affirm that question. Like, I think that is an important question. That, you know, this industry that I'm a part of is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's whole forms formulated to how to target people's pain points to get them to buy. This is a reality for me, and it's part of what I hold in my field. And these questions are holy yet uncomfortable. And I definitely asked myself that. Definitely. And yeah, I'm reluctant to give an answer, because first, I'm curious, like when you feel into your body and you ask that question, like from your frame, because you have a lot of complexity. You're not even from the US, you're from Jakarta. You have this whole like collectivist experience that you're coming from, and there's wisdom there. And I feel curious, like when you tap into that, how do you feel about it? What is your answer for you, at least in this moment?
The first thing that comes up is my inner child. There's a younger part of me, and this younger part of me was not allowed to have a say in their reality. And there's nothing more liberating than this part being allowed to even name what they want.
Mm.
Or not even that far. Like this part being allowed to say what's on their mind is huge. To have their experience is huge. And yeah, you're correct in naming that I come from this collectivistic society, and it's really interesting because it's kind of giving me a very different take on what the collective even means. Because I see that when people talk about the collective in an individualistic society like the US, it's coming from an unmet need. It's coming from an unmet need of having community, having people rely upon, people you can rely upon. But what people never seem to understand on an embodied level is the price you have to pay in order to have that holding, right? Like you don't get that holding for free in community. You have to pay a price of admission, And it's like, I think there's a very thin line between collective ways of looking at the world and approaching the world and tribal ways of looking at the world. And I don't really know where the line is. But there's definitely like this, you're in, but this person's out kind of vibe, So that's what's coming up for me right now. So I don't think that's an answer, but I don't know if it's either or, because but it's so fascinating because I think the question maybe comes more from the recognition on some deep level that the way we're doing it, it's really hard to find that balance, I think. You know? Yeah. What comes up for you?
The word reciprocity comes up for me here. And it's something that I deeply understand in my family. And I understand when you say the cost, right? Like normally for me to be in that system, there's something that I need to leave behind to fit in those social norms of that system, right?
Yeah.
And so part of my work right now is I've done a lot of this individualized healing work, a lot, to the point to where I got so in it the last few years, I'm just pathologizing myself constantly and I forgot how to live, And Katabasis is really for that person. Like we have this individualized knowledge and there's an edge to bringing it into life and into the world. So it causes this kind of like freeze, at least for me. And so part of my work lately has been being more of who I am when I'm out there in the world with my family, with my loved ones in small ways and letting them, I'm not blowing up the system, I love them, but letting them also be changed by me and not always having this experience of I need to change to fit this system, but also I'm going to be in this system. I'm not demanding that you change, but I invite you to be changed by me and my wholeness. And that's what I mean by reciprocity. I know a lot about extraction. I know a lot about it, right? Extracting from cultures, extracting from the land. And reciprocity is what I'm moving towards. And I don't know what that looks like yet. And I think that's why I was so drawn to radical aliveness as a frame, is that it's not just individual, it's interpersonal and it's systemic. All of this is a part of quote unquote healing, which healing, right, means something different to everyone. And welcoming that all in.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear if you feel like sharing and if it feels alive for you. How did you get involved in radical aliveness? What was that experience like? How has it, I mean, it's kind of a big question, but how has it shifted for you?
I was, part of my history is that I lost my mother of a drug overdose. I had no infrastructure to deal with what happened when I lost her. And so I went into intravenous drug use. I used opium poppy, aka heroin, which is part of why I welcomed poppy into the group Katabasis field, is because Demeter also took the poppy seed when Persephone was taken to the underworld, and Hecate was the one that was like, hey, let's go get your daughter. I know where she is. She's with Hades. And so I had a long apprenticeship with dulling my anger and dulling my pain until I stopped that. And I dated a Taurus, actually. And this brilliant Taurus was like, I know what you need. You should come into RA because I'm in Radical Aliveness. And I went into the workshop. I may have told you this story before. And the leader of that particular workshop, I let out this guttural scream. I was full of it at the point. And she met me with, oh my gosh, you are so fierce. And I'd never had my energy welcomed in that way. And so I decided that I would join the program, and I didn't really know exactly why or what I was doing. And I very quickly, in my second year, started running some groups and treatment centers. I've been working with creatives ever since I can remember. And creative practice has been what carried me through the worst moments in my life, including getting off of heroin. Like, this is my practice. It is the practice. Not to make something for product, but to make something for process, for expression, for collaboration, for exploring the mystery. And so I've been doing it ever since. Ritual is a huge part of my personal practice. I believe in something called, that I'm kind of calling the ritual instinct. You know, the relationship between humans and ritual is so ancient. And in some ways, the more that I study people who, and a lot of people struggle with, I don't like the word addiction. I'm trying to find a new word, but these habits, these cycles, these rituals,
maybe,
in a way, yeah. Like, they're feeding the ritual instinct, but in a way that really takes us out of ourselves, right? I have a ritual with my phone. I open it up every day when I wake up.
Yes.
Right. And it takes me out of my morning, out of my practice. And so really looking at those things. And I love to support people in that place to just become more aware of what they're doing without the demand to change, because we get to say yes to everything, even the things that hurt, even the things that don't feel good, even the things that may have been demonized or we were taught to hide. Like, those are holy places. Very important, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to bring in a personal experience that I feel like sharing with you, which is, I came into Katabasis really afraid of rituals, actually. I think there's something about my religious upbringing and the loadedness of that word that is scary.
Wise.
You know?
Wise. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I can't say that Katabasis was like the like the antidote to that, but I think it certainly showed me a path where I can explore myself in ritual that doesn't feel activating for me. And also for me to begin seeing a lot of my life as ritual. You know, a lot of the things that I'm already doing as ritual. Like, I think halfway through Katabasis, I realized I cannot function without my morning shower. Like, this is a non-negotiable for me. That's my ritual. You know, I have to step into the shower. And yeah, just even noticing myself in relationship to these threads, right, that are kind of holding me together as a being as I'm moving through liminal spaces in my life, you know, especially moving through emotional liminal spaces by anchoring myself somatically and physically in ritual, you know, has been something that I've been thinking a lot about. So I think it's leading me to a question for you, which is, last time we spoke, at least on this podcast, I remember us talking a lot about somatic practices
Mm-hmm.
and the ways in which in your cosmology, what it is and what it's not in your cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you feel like exploring that again at this point,
Yeah.
at a different
Yeah.
moment in time.
Yeah, I do. I'm curious what I will say. And I just want to also, before I move on, say that your hesitancy of ritual makes a lot of sense to me
Mm.
because ritual is loaded.
Mhm.
Ritual has not just been a form of connection and creating social bonds and harmony between for people since the beginning of time. It has not just been that. It has also
Yeah.
been a form of social control, a form of social distraction. We see it all the time in sports. Sports are highly ritualized, political
Mm.
ceremonies, highly ritualized, right?
Mhm.
These
Mhm.
ritual practices have also, yeah, they've been a form of maintaining social order and control and hierarchy. I even think about the Catholic Church, how they wouldn't let people read the Bible and highly ritualized, right? In
Yeah.
certain ways. And that I want to affirm people's discernment. I think that in the world of social media, and everyone has a damn hot take, which is great. I love to hear y'all talking, us talking, right? I do it too. But approaching things with discernment and allowing and honoring my own perspective to notice what things come up when I hear certain things and asking ourselves, is this true for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of how I get in tune with what is true for me is through being in my body.
Mm.
And even the concept of somatics is interesting, right? Because a lot of somatic practices that we see in modernity have origins in indigenous cultures. You know, there's a lot of extraction there, and a lot of somatic practices. Say, for instance, I'm going to name a couple: core energetics, rolfing. These different things. They were created in the 1970s from a Western
Mm.
lens,
Mhm.
where these were very different times. They were very different times.
Yeah.
There was a huge war going on. They were trying to break out of social constraints. So a lot of the
Mm.
somatic practices were very catharsis based, right? Trying to break things open. And I've been thinking about that a lot now with one of my teachers because at least for me, what I'm needing now in 2023 is much different from that. Catharsis is not
Mm.
necessarily my goal.
Mhm.
It's more like, for me, right, is more like gathering. In certain ways, I can feel so fragmented because my phone and my work and my relationships and constantly having contact with people and needing to be in my car all the time instead of walking. My intention of somatic practice is more about gathering these pieces back into me and inhabiting all the spaces of my body, including my fingertips, my vulva, my anus, my ankles, and my mind. My mind is undoubtedly a part of my body. If I'm making separation between mind and body, I'm splitting again. I'm splitting
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That really blew me away and open and also kind of helped me integrate something. I can't
Mm-hmm.
really conceptualize it, I think, in this moment. My brain is not working that fast,
Yeah.
but wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you notice like here in your body as you, because we're kind of going back to some of the principles. It's like being willing to be changed and running it
Hmm.
through your system. Is this my
Hmm.
perspective? Which
Yeah.
takes time.
I think here's what's coming up for me, which is a story. I was just listening to someone talk. I'm actually going to check for 1 second who it is because I want to
Mm-hmm.
quote this properly.
Yeah.
But I was hearing on a podcast episode this person talking about rest. This person's name is Octavia Rahim.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about rest and how in their yoga practice they used to be this overachieving person, and then they had this health crisis and had to really slow everything down, and one day brought their mother into one of the classes that were leading. And then their mother afterwards, it's funny because the whole experience didn't seem very comfortable for the mother, So Octavia was saying something along the lines of, it must have been difficult to take instructions from your child, And then after the class, the mother said, I remembered something, which was when I was a child, I was just running around the field and I was so happy. And so Octavia was saying something along the lines of how rest is a reminder of our capacity for joy. And I think what you are saying to me is like the close cousin to that, right? Like there's something about how we're currently moving through practices that help us remember how to enjoy. And I've been thinking about that word, as a word nerd, enjoy, right? It's kind of like we've been using the word ensoulment quite a bit, like what does it mean to like reintegrate soul into our conscious way of being in the world. And I've been thinking about enjoyment as, what does it look like for me to put myself in joy? To be in the field of joy.
Yeah. Like, again, laboratory space, like trying it on, seeing how it fits, seeing how it changes the landscape of your being. I have a lot of criticism, and not criticism. I'm in my own discernment process around social media and somatics right now. So I want to name that and place that in the frame. I see a lot of like, move this way to release this emotion, move this way to do this, very diagnostic in a way. And for me, I don't really work that way with somatics. I'm not really prescribing a movement. I might have some ideas, some like little creative hits, but ultimately in somatic practice, I want to invite us. How do you experience joy in your body as you run through the field? What, like the question I asked before, what lights up? What goes away? Allowing, to me, somatics is more about allowing your own experience to actually be felt, being a body in that joyful experience, rather than trying to figure it out or know why or make sure you can come back to it. Just be in it now. Be in it now. And for me, dance. It's dance. Like there is, to me, and I don't mean like dance. I mean, yes, twerking is cool, but I mean like, can you dance it? Say you're anxious. Maybe somebody is anxious as you're listening to this. Hey, I see you. I feel you. How would that anxiety express itself in your body? When I'm anxious, I notice that my chest closes in and I want to kind of bring my head down and my voice changes a little. And just trying that on, letting my body express it, coming back out, shaking it off, right? Trying something new. Like that's to me where I'm at with my somatic practice and dancing it. That's why I wanted to invite us to dance and move a little bit before we talked. It's like filling myself up with me, no matter what the experience is, without a demand for it to even feel good. Sometimes I dance and I'm like, wow, I have chronic pain. I'm recovering from a chronic injury. Can I be with that?
Yeah. I've noticed that being in Katabasis, we definitely have a dance practice in Katabasis 1.0. First of all, it was interesting because the idea of dancing in front of strangers halfway across the continent, on camera was strange. But also so I don't even know what the right word for it is.
Mm.
It was a wonder practice for me.
Mm.
It brought up wonder because it's like, wow,
Oh,
look at this. You know, look at what we can do together.
yeah.
And I've noticed a lot of the times after dancing it out, I don't always feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always feel
Mm-hmm.
better. Sometimes I feel a lot
Mm-hmm.
worse, like a lot worse. Things were
Mm.
stirred up and then I felt bad, you know, but
Mm.
I think a lot about my suspicion personally towards any kind of spirituality or modality or practices that promise this feel good pill, you know? It's so funny because I don't know. Maybe this is a generation thing. I've trained and I've been in spaces with some, with communities where people are a little bit older than our generation, and
Mm-hmm.
people seem to really have no resistance to that.
Mm.
So I'm not sure if this is a generational thing, because maybe
Yeah.
30 years from now, people will listen back to this conversation and think, Jonathan and Madison are such freaks. But
Yeah.
there's a part of me that's like, I'm not satisfied with that, because
Yeah. Yeah.
it feels like it's not saying yes to everything.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm. Mm. We can't say yes to everything all the time, right? Like
Yeah,
sometimes I need to
that too.
put the shit on the table because I need to function. I live in a capitalist society. And
Yeah.
at the same time, that's why I mention, even as we have this conversation, the multi-billion-dollar industry that is the wellness industry, because
Mm.
what sells?
Mm-hmm.
What sells? You're
Mm-hmm.
going to feel better. You're
Mm.
going to ascend to some place beyond this climate crisis and all the things that our generation faces and we fear for our future. And for me, I'm not about that life.
Mm.
I
Mm.
am more about being in this world because I give a fuck about it. I love this planet.
Mm.
I love people.
Mm.
I want us. And so for me, if I were holding a space where I was inviting everybody to feel better all the time, there's some way where I'm not sure that would be helping people attune to their own reality, because we are facing systemic global issues right now,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they matter to me. And
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm an American and I might be a little cushioned from it doesn't mean that I necessarily want that for myself personally. Personally.
Yeah. Yeah. What's on your mind as you are preparing for the second run of Katabasis?
Mm. The more that I can be with the parts of me that
Mm.
I have been taught to hide, the more that I find I can be with the realities of this world. I don't
Mm.
need to turn away from it. I don't need to turn the radio off as much. I
Mm.
can I can feel it. I can go, oh, water crisis, ooh, fire in Hawaii. Like I can feel it rather than turn away from it. And that to me is very important for me,
Mm.
because the collective is not just human centered. It is the land, it is the animals, it is the waters. Um, and that matters to me.
Mm.
And as I start the second iteration of Katabasis, I feel this massive invitation. I feel like I'm in this place energetically and in my own practice where I'm making an invitation for whoever wants to step into more of who they are, knowing that who we are is also this world.
Mm.
And I feel that for me, dance, movement, reciprocity, trying on different forms of community, navigating conflict in these different ways, following impulse, sensation, navigating intention and impact, they ultimately help I'm gonna back up. For some reason, I'm getting lost in my own shit. What I'm feeling for the next Katabasis is an invitation. I'm feeling a lot of unknown. You know, you would think that as I'm running the second iteration, I would know something. Of course, I am knowing certain things, but every group that arrives is something so new. So I'm very much in the mystery. I'm feeling a lot of curiosity about who will come, you know, and I'm inviting a friend to come and teach movement, which I'm excited about. And in addition to that, like if people listen to this conversation and they want to move with me, right? Like, let's just see. I'd be happy. I'm meeting with people to see how we jive and if they would be a right fit for this space. Because although this is curated, this is also sacred space that we're holding together. This is a container where we're really going to go somewhere for 6 months through the darkest part of the year. And so I'm holding it in a lot of sacredness. I'm feeding the collective altar. I already opened it. If you know anything about my work, one of the biggest things I do is I feed an altar, and everyone who's in the container feeds their own altar that connects into that altar. So the web is here with us, Jonathan. And I'm always so grateful for all your water and your Piscean energy and what it brings out in me, you know, in the ways that you see me and also the ways that I see you. And I feel like, you know, we've built some relationship, even though I've never met you in person, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. I feel such immense gratitude for not just your work, but your presence and the ways that you've taught me to like look within, you know, and be curious. And in the different ways that we've worked together and in our friendship, there has just been such a willingness to be open and to explore and to play and also to like do the work, you know. And I think that's really it's been such a gift, and you're such a gift. So thank you.
I want to be more human with people, you know? And I think although Katabasis is this underworld world journey, and I'm talking about the systemic issues in the world, like there were also some moments where we tapped into some serious joy, serious like connectivity, serious challenge, like all of it. And so my intention is to invite more of the world into this container each time that I run it, and to also be challenged as a human. How human can I be? Because I don't come in with all the answers, but I do have a perspective, and I'm going to name it. And so I love to hear your perspective on everything. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Madison. Is there anything else that I haven't asked that I should ask? Or anything else you want to say before we close the space?
Yes. This is for those who dream of stranger worlds. This is for those who have always felt like they've never fit into a box. And I want to remind you that that is sacred, that is important, and I welcome it here. And I believe that those of us who are able to stand in those places will impact our world. So I just want to affirm us strange beings. May we be ever more strange and ever more in ourselves and create from that place. A prayer. I just had to end it with a little prayer, That's me.
I love it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's it for my conversation with Madison. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening. And I really hope that something in that conversation stirred something in you and prompted a reflection that that brought you something, something to think about, something to contemplate, something to assist you in more deeply walking your own path as a human. I am so grateful for your presence, for your attention, and if you feel called, I welcome you. I encourage you to check out Madison's work, check out Katabasis. If you feel like working with Madison, I know Madison is doing discovery calls, and so yeah, just book something and see if this container might be nourishing for you too. All right. I am wishing you a beautiful week. And if you feel compelled, I would love to receive your support in getting this podcast out there. If you feel like sharing this episode with anybody who can benefit from this episode, I would really appreciate that. And yeah, this podcast is truly a labor of love, and there's nothing that really lifts my spirit like receiving a review or having you share this conversation. And if you've already done that, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm wishing you a lot of ease in your lived experience, and I'm excited for whenever it is that we get to see one another again, and whenever you tune into this podcast. Sending you lots of love, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you.